And welcome to our new store. If you haven't been here yet, we hope you'll love it as much as we do. We just love this space. A little bit about us is this is our mission, vision, and values. We're going to go over this basically is all about you. This is why we're doing events like this and getting us all together and have the same passion for nature. Our mission is connecting people to nature. Our vision is to serve, educate, and create memorable experiences. And our values is together we fly. I have to thank all of our staff here. There's about 12 people who work on events like this, so they are very much appreciated. And now to intro.
Yeah.
How do you know you're an event planner?
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce Justin Evertson. He's a green infrastructure coordinator at the Nebraska Forest Service and also the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum. And I'm going to turn it over to Justin after this. I'll give you a little read about ourselves. I'm going to not immediately out on this event. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Can you hear me? Is this loud enough? I should speak loud probably too. I apologize for my voice. My wife says it's kind of grating and I slur my words. She can't hear me half the time. So I apologize for that up front. Sometimes she's teasing about it, but she says, would you please enunciate? Oh, if I say something you didn't catch, just say, repeat that. Because I do slur my words sometimes, not on purpose. I guess I'm just an anxious talker. But I'm here from the University of Nebraska tonight. I work for the Nebraska Forest Service and the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum. Have you heard of the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum? All right, very good. We got a handout for you tonight you should have had on your chair. Trees and Shrubs for Wildlife. My cohort, Bob Henriksen, and I put this together a few years ago. Janelle, he will be here when? In May? All right. Bob is amazing with his plant knowledge, the guy in Nebraska that knows this stuff better than anybody. So come back for that. Now you're going to need 2 or 3 hours for Bob because he's kind of long-winded. And I was told I had to be done by 9 o'clock tonight. So I'm just teasing you. We'll have fun with this. I'm going to try and have humor in this. So smile and laugh if you feel like it, or throw something at me if you don't, maybe. Make it soft like a muffin or a donut. And then there's other things from the Statewide Arboretum handouts that you can get at your leisure, maybe at the end of the program here. One just on becoming a member. The Statewide Arboretum is a membership organization tied to the Nebraska Forest Service on the University of Nebraska campus. We're real fortunate that all of you, taxpayers of Nebraska, get to support the Nebraska Forest Service and a little bit of the Statewide Arboretum because the home is on the campus. But all the programming, paying for special people like me, takes a lot of money raising. So they say, become a member. And I agree with them. There's a publication I brought here from 2018, our annual publication, The Seed, Why We Love Birds. Everything I talk about tonight is probably in here somewhere. And then here's another publication, Eastern Pollinators for Nebraska, or Flowers for Pollinators, Eastern Nebraska. So pick those things up at your leisure at the end of the event. I got several slide images to show you to just get my brain going, but we don't have to get through them all. We can have a conversation about anything you want to talk about. I almost feel like I have to be at a confessional, like I'm Justin Evertson, I'm a birder, I'm a landscape nut, I'm a wildlife nut, I'm a tree nut. But we don't have to confess those. Those things aren't sins, are they? Those are wonderful things. So I feel a little sheepish around my family sometimes. Grandpa's talking about birds again or trees. So, but it's wonderful to have these things in our hearts. And I kind of feel like we really got to work hard at holding on to this institutional knowledge. The further we go along in our society, I worry that my grandkids won't have a clue about being outside, although I make them go outside. So we got to hold on to it and push it on to our fellow humans a little bit more, right? What do you think about the spring we're having? Isn't this normally yeah, the last 3 weeks of winter is where we should normally be right now, March 5th. Some years it's been like 10 below right now. So we'll take, what is it today, 60 degrees. We got up to 80 degrees already this spring, right? Or winter. So we love that in February and March, but I'm nervous about April, May, and June because last year in Waverly, where I live, I come from where I live now, we had the driest 12-month stretch on record between September of 2022 and the end of August 2023. The driest 12-month stretch recorded record in 130 years of record keeping. So it was down below 15 inches of moisture in that period that we would normally get 30 to 35. That's just telling us that, boy, when we think about landscapes, we got to be a little cognizant about what we're putting out there because I live in Waverly. We were under water restrictions the last 2 years. If you were watering your lawn except for 2 days a week, you were getting a ticket, which I'd actually think is kind of a good thing. We all share in the cost of maintaining all that infrastructure, so it's not wasted on that water hogging lawn. Let's put it on the landscapes that sustain birds and insects and those kinds of things. So that's just in my personal soul. Let's do right by the environment, by each other, by ecology. And I think we can have our cake and eat it too as we head into kind of a worrisome future for climate. This is what we're dealing with right now is probably an interruption in the kinds of climates we're used to. So who knows what the future holds for that? I'm pretty positive about it. I am. I think we humans are an amazing animal that can figure things out, and we're going to get through it okay. But we're probably going to have some heat and some drought to deal with, so let's think about it in our landscapes. You can't see this image very well, but I took these pictures just today. This is my backyard, my bird feeders, just a little image of my backyard to say to you that in Waverly, I too am fighting the squirrels and the raccoons. Oh my God, the things I have to do to keep. I figured out this baffle on the bird feeder, and then any of you try the slinky? Yes.
Jumped up, grabbed the slinky
This,
down.
yeah, it's all, it's just gymnastics for the squirrel. Yeah, it's hard to love a squirrel, isn't it? Oh my God, they're horrible, and they can eat 50 pounds of bird seed in a week. So this thing here that I figured out, the baffle with the slinky, I don't get squirrels on these at all anymore. So it works for me. I did take down my feeder that I have tied or suctioned to my kitchen window. I cannot keep the squirrels out of it. And even when I have a cover on it, they're up on top of it, knocking it off the window. So I had to take it down. So darn squirrels. These are the birds I get in my yard. In Waverly, we don't have anything super special. You guys are on the edge of the Missouri River here, so you're going to probably hear Carolina wrens and vireos. I don't get those in Waverly, dadgummit, but I'm up to about 37 species I've seen in my backyard. So cardinals, brown creepers. Did any of you get the brown creepers a little bit late winter? The nuthatch, black-capped chickadees, and then the juncos, of course. Brown-headed cowbird. For a lot of years, I heard that gurgling sound in the background. What the heck is that? That's the brown-headed brown-headed cowbird in late spring. Red-winged blackbird, the Baltimore oriole, the goldfinch, cedar waxwing, and then the woodpeckers. I get all these woodpeckers. I do not get the red-headed woodpecker in my yard, but I do see it in the trees outside of town. So I count it as being a Waverly bird. And then also, sometimes in the same 2 weeks, you get a Cooper's hawk this big eating all your birds, or you might get a ruby-throated hummingbird flying through either in the spring or the fall. I'm not very good at feeding these guys. I'm always like, oh, I got to get my nectar out. By then, they're usually gone. But these are the things in my yard. I love it. And then my wife and I hit our heads during the pandemic a few years ago. We were not bored. We sold a house that we had bought for our kids to rent when they were going to college. So we had extra money. We invested it in a cabin in Tennessee, a short-term rental cabin. This is an advertisement tonight for you to go to Tennessee and stay in the sweet seclusion cabin will give you a good deal. But I bring that up tonight because it's in Tennessee, right at the edge of the Smoky Mountains. I go there. I love the trees. I'm a tree nut. These great big tall tulip poplars that are 150 feet tall, oaks and hickories and all kinds of things. But the birds I hear that I don't hear in Waverly, the Carolina chickadee. And then every evening it's the whippoorwills. They're really prominent there. The Carolina wren, the wood thrush, things we just don't see here so much. So birds all over. The trees and the birds, wherever I go, I'm looking at the trees, figuring out what grows, and I'm listening for the birds. And now that I have the Merlin Bird ID app, I'm a professional. I really know how to identify them. I'm not a bird expert by any means. I'll bet a lot of you in this room know more than I do, but I just love birds and I love learning about it. So we just mentioned squirrels. It's hard to love a squirrel. And I'm the first to admit that. I've had times where I could have killed these squirrels in my backyard, and now I'm such a softy I can't bring myself to do it. So I try to live. They're kind of entertaining to me too, and now we get a black racist squirrel in our yard in Waverly, so that's kind of neat to me. But here are some interesting facts about squirrels. There are 280 different species across the globe. Nebraska has 3. The fox squirrel, the red squirrel, and the flying squirrel. Front teeth never stop growing. Squirrel means shadow tail in Greek. Some fox squirrels and gray squirrels are black, and that means that there's been interbreeding going on across different species and subspecies. Squirrels can fall from 90 feet without getting hurt. Hind legs are double jointed, great for running up and down trees, and they're important for tree survival and forest health. We wouldn't have hickory trees and oak trees in our forests like we do without the squirrels and the jays working together to spread the seeds. So I want to be accepting of what Mother Nature brought us, even these squirrels, and it's hard. But I'll tell you a fun story. The flying squirrel, do you get them in Omaha? They're probably in the woods of Fontenelle Forest, maybe, and maybe not. They showed up in Lincoln the last few years. They were on the University East campus. They were cutting a limb out of a tree, and they actually flew out of the tree. So now there's an effort to document the flying squirrels in Lincoln that are native to the very southeast Nebraska woods, like Indian Cave Park. So hey, we don't have to dislike all the squirrels. I do like a flying squirrel, unless they're flying at me. That's a long way around to say, hey, sometimes appreciating the unappreciated is a good thing. One of my mantras in life is to get people to relax about weeds. We're going to bring it back to landscaping a little bit. If we fight too hard, some of the weeds that come to our landscapes, we're really disrupting things ecologically, especially if it's in the lawn. We really got to think this thing through. Now, I'm not saying we should celebrate every weed in the landscape, but here comes honeyvine milkweed. Hey, it feeds the monarchs. Violets in your yard? They would feed several types of fritillaries, including the threatened and endangered regal fritillaria in Nebraska. Or how about nettles? They attract commas and question marks. None of these things are celebrated in our lawns and landscapes, and yet they're really good for ecology. So maybe think through a little bit. Do you really need to spray out all the weeds? Maybe leave a rough patch in the back of your yard where those nettles and those violets are allowed to be. I don't want to get too deep and dark tonight, but the globe, humanity, we are facing a lot of environmental challenges. Habitat loss, decreased biodiversity, extinction rates are climbing, the climate is changing, water issues. In Waverly, we have huge water issues associated, the lack of it, but also nitrates in our groundwater, ocean acidification, population, human apathy, and things really kind of working against what I would hope we all just embrace in an ecological sense of the environment around us. But we all can play a role in turning this around. This is the evidence that's mounting on that. So things like the World Wildlife Fund Living Planet Report, 52% decline in vertebrate species since 1970. They estimate 3 billion. There are 3 billion less birds in the United States now every summer than there were in 1970 from habitat loss. 24 million acres of the eastern U.S. tall grass prairie was plowed up in these last few years for agriculture. And then there's things related to insects. Yeah, it can be kind of dark when you stop and think about it. And if you're so inclined, you go, oh, why am I even doing this? But no, like I said to you earlier, I'm hopeful. We humans can figure this out, and I think we're going to turn a corner if we do it right. These are some of the things that are a little imperiled in Nebraska. The mountain plover in western Nebraska, the greater sage grouse in the southern prairie, greater prairie chicken also south, and then the bobolink that flies thousands and thousands of miles across oceans, the Pacific Ocean to very south tip of South America, maybe even Antarctica, I can't remember, and then they come back in the summer to our prairies. Wow, the bobolink. The river otter, northern long-eared bat is endangered now. There's diseases getting into bats. The southern flying squirrel we just mentioned, the swift fox, and then some turtles and snakes and amphibians, the Great Plains toad, even the tiger salamander we all knew as kids was pretty abundant, much less so now. And then how about a few insects? The regal fritillary, the monarch, the American burying beetle, the western bumblebee. They're on pretty serious decline in our part of the world. And then there are plant species too. White oak reaches its very western limit. The most dominant oak of the eastern U.S. reaches its western limit in southeast Nebraska, just a couple counties south of us. The few trees we have there are almost gone. So it'll be gone from Nebraska, its western extent. Those acorns in that are a genetic mix of things that tolerate the Great Plains environment. We don't want to lose those trees. Prairie white Ute's lady tresses, prairie white fringed orchid, and out west the Colorado butterfly plant. So I'm making it pretty dark on you, aren't I, all of a sudden? But hey, in my opinion, it's a moral imperative to try and change this, to right the course so that we can do better by ecology and the environment and all these species. And it starts right in our own backyard, coming to wonderful places like this to get some bird seed and some feeders and other things to attract birds to our yard, and then to plant the things like they've done around the perimeter here, the native plants, other well-adapted plants that help expand ecology. So right up front, 10 tips for habitat-friendly landscapes. Number one, the more biodiverse, the better. In your own landscape, if you only have 20 plants right now, try to make it 40 and then maybe 80. You don't have to plant everything. It doesn't have to be as diverse as a prairie, but the more you have, the better. Think about shelter, food, and water. Emphasize native plants, regionally native plants, plants that would have been here 500 years ago, 200 years ago. It doesn't have to be only native plants, but start introducing the native plants that tolerate your space. Plant in groups with tight spacing and think in layers. Ground layer, shrub layer, vertical layer, overhead layer from tree canopy or along the edge. Maybe it's evergreen trees in a vertical layer. The layering of the landscape gives way more habitat to your landscape. You'll get way more things in it. We were talking about bats before we started up here this evening, and you won't have bats in your yard unless you have an upper layer, trees and things that they can nest in. So just think about that. Maybe you don't want bats. I love bats to think about. I sit on my backyard deck of a summer evening most evenings and tip a beer and watch the bats come and go. And it's fun to watch their patterns. It's just neat to know they're there. And they're so important for chasing insects, mosquitoes, and things like that. So improve and sustain the soil health in your yard. Practice nutrient recycling. If you haul everything away to the landfill, your leaves and your lawn clippings, you're not helping your soil. Practice smart lawn care. We could do a 2-hour program on please relax about that lawn a little bit. Quit overwatering it, over chemicalizing it. I'm not saying get rid of all your lawn, but just be smart about it. No pesticides. No, especially insecticides, except as a last resort, and it's something you know what you're doing. The one thing I've done in my yard that's an insecticide is my best tree in my yard is a white ash. And now emerald ash borer is in Waverly. It's killing a lot of the ash trees there. I'm going to try and save my ash tree for a lot of years because it is a home to a lot of wildlife. And now there are pretty safe treatment options to try and keep that tree alive for a while. But don't go out and just spray to get rid of bugs. I'm sure none of you guys are that way, but we see people who are. And then be water wise and enjoy, engage, and appreciate wildlife. We talked about emphasizing native plants. The reason we do that is because the native plants come with the native ecology, the native insects that feed the other animals, especially the native birds that come to our yards. So native plants bring native wildlife. One that's always on our head, usually this part of the world, is the monarch. The monarch populations really fluctuate because of their habitat in Mexico is under stress, and the fir trees they live in to overwinter. And then the big thing against monarch is their flyaway in the middle of the U.S. is where all the corn and soybean farming happens. And there's so much effort to get rid of weeds and things in farmers' fields that it's really hard on monarch establishments. So plant some milkweed in your yard. You're helping the monarchs. Painted ladies, they love asters, sunflowers, echinacea. The red admiral, there's that nettles again. Pellitory, a weed that everybody gets in their landscape if you don't work at it too hard, and it's doing good things for the red admiral butterfly. The mourning cloak, it's one of the few butterflies that can overwinter as adult and come out this time of year. The mourning cloak needs willow, elm, and hackberry. The tawny emperor is in hackberry. The comma loves nettles, hops, and elm. Question mark, nettles, elm, and hackberry. Have you ever had the commas and the question marks in your landscape? If you have rotting fruit late summer or a sap oozing from your tree, you're probably going to get one or the other of those. The black swallowtail, anything in the parsley family. So carrots, fennel, dill, parsley, but even our native zizia is a good plant for that. Tiger swallowtail, cherry linden, cottonwood, and willow. The regal fritillary is a prairie butterfly. You probably won't get it in the middle of the city in your backyard prairie, but if you're on the edge of the city and you have some prairie plants, especially violets, you'll probably see regal fritillary every so often. And we do get spangled fritillary in pretty good numbers where trees and prairie kind of come together. The spring azure, the clouded sulfur, the eastern tailed blue, all things that we can get in our yards and landscapes. Who doesn't like a hummingbird moth? And it's like midsummer. Is that a hummingbird? Nope, just a sphinx moth, but they're so cool. People used to kill them all because they'd get on our tomatoes and they're the tomato hornworm. Well, you can just pick them off and still enjoy your tomatoes. You don't have to kill them. Dragonflies and damselflies. And then there's 16 million beneficial or non-problematic other insects to think about, like the mason bee, the leafcutter bee, the bumblebee, and this bee mimic, the hoverfly, which in its larval state is a good predator on aphids and other things. Soldier beetles, if you have anything in the fall that's blooming, especially a yellow flowered goldenrod or something, you'll be covered in soldier beetles. Milkweed beetles, the firefly, which is actually a lightning bug related to the soldier beetle, and then blister beetles. There are thousands of beetles that do good for our landscapes. Seven-spotted lady beetle is our native one. Here's the one that's here in abundance now. That's the Asian lady beetle. You can tell by the W shape on its forehead there. That's the one that bites you a little bit. We're not going to get rid of them, but they're eating aphids too, so we're probably just going to have to accept them in the landscape. Here's our native praying mantis, the Carolina mantid. Definitely a wonderful thing. There's the egg mass. It has those horizontal lines in it. And then there's the Asian, the Chinese mantid, which is big, 3 times bigger than our native mantid. It's big as your hand, right? I think it could catch and kill a hummingbird. So those things are big. They're here to stay. They have that big clouded ball of egg mass. It's different than the Carolina mantid. I'm not a big fan of these, but we're not going to get rid of them. Lacewings and damselbugs, we don't think about it, but they're really killing. They're a great predator to aphids and small insects that we don't want on our vegetables. Arachnids, who doesn't like spiders? A garden spider that's this big around right by your back deck door maybe isn't the best thing in the world, especially when your head runs into it. But man, they're doing good things in the garden. Crab spiders, and they're different colors depending on the type of flower they're on. And remember, these insects feed the birds. Thank goodness they do. This store feeds the birds in the winter and the spring, and then the birds are going to shift over to all those insects that we're growing and rearing in our ecologically diverse landscapes. We're in Nebraska, the edge of Iowa, the edge of the Midwest, running out to the Rocky Mountain region. We're in this flyover country that's in the middle of everything, and it's literally where east meets west. The eastern U.S. hardwood forest reaches its western limit here. I'm from Kimball County, way west. That's where the western Rocky Mountain forest reaches its eastern limit with ponderosa pine and Rocky Mountain juniper. In between, there's all this wonderful prairie. And if you ever go up on the Niobrara River, tube the Niobrara, that's a place where three types of forest biome mix: western pine lands, eastern deciduous trees, and northern boreal species like birch, and then 4 or 5 types of prairie: tall prairie, short prairie, mixed prairie. It all occurs in Nebraska. That's pretty darn cool to think about with our changing climate, warming climate, drought coming our way. We've got all these wonderful biomes in Nebraska to pick plants out of, and they've stood the test of time for literally thousands of years. Since the last ice ages, glaciers retreated 15,000 years ago, Nebraska's biomes have been duking it out. Trees have come and gone, prairies come and gone, and all those plants say, hey, bring on a warming, dry climate. We're here to stay. So let's look at some of these native plants for our landscapes. I put a list together of trees and shrubs. There's another handout for you. Don't feel like you got to try and keep up with this. Also, go to the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum website, and you'll have all kinds of plant lists for for native plants to bring insects and birds. But I'll fly through a few of our wonderful prairie plants to begin with, okay? How can you not like prairie when you have fantastic plants like this? Cytodes grama will grow anywhere, even in parched shade, and it's a mixed grass prairie plant. Tough as nails, blends well into all these other perennial plants you might want to grow. Little bluestem, our state native grass, is fantastically red in the fall. Prairie dropseed literally smells like popcorn, buttered popcorn, if you brush against it in the fall when it has its seed heads on. It's got that veiled look, the sun shining through it. It's a fantastic native plant. Different types of blue indigo. There's the dwarf blue indigo and the tall blue indigo. If you get this to grow in your yard, you'll have it for 30 or 40 years, as long as a tree or more. They're super long-lived, incredible plants. Echinaceas, the purple coneflower. A lot of people in gardens curse these because they seed themselves out all over. I love that because I know I'm feeding the goldfinches all winter long. So accept some wildness with your echinacea. In Nebraska, we have 3 types of native echinacea that don't show up too much in the garden center, but pale purple coneflower here on the left, that's a tall prairie thing, gets this tall, and it has these filigreed, fluttery ray petals that flap around in the wind. Really neat. I have a fantastic patch in my yard, easy to grow, and they're not as wild as that other purple coneflower. In western Nebraska, where I'm from, we'd have the black Samson or the western coneflower that's about this tall and can live on bird poop and dust and hardly any moisture ever. So these are tough plants. Mountain mint, a great plant for pollinators. It smells good. It's a great plant for beauty, and then you can harvest it and use it in tea brewing and things like that. It's got a wonderful minty flavor to it. When Bob Henriksen comes back in a month to talk, or in May to talk about these things, he'll knock your socks off with all the things we can use with our prairie plants. Milkweeds, butterfly milkweed, common milkweed, showy milkweed, all things that we can have in our landscapes. The one thing about milkweed, beware, they're not well-behaved garden plants. If you plant it here, it's going to die, but it'll come up over here, and just accept it for the common milkweed and maybe the rosy milkweed. The little milkweed, the butterfly milkweed, is a little easier to grow as a garden plant, but it too is kind of short-lived here. Let it pop up over there. The upright prairie coneflower, sometimes called Mexican hat, can be yellow or red. Here's a tall one. The grayhead coneflower gets this tall. You better have a lot of room to put that in the landscape. We have all kinds of gay feathers or blazing stars. This is dotted gay feather on the left, grows across western Nebraska. The rough gay feather, Liatris aspera, is a taller one that's more native to eastern Nebraska. Wild quinine, not a great name, but a great plant that blooms all summer long in profuse white tabletop kind of heads to it. So wonderful plant. You get in the fall and there's goldenrods that we need to think about. Showy goldenrod on the left with those spray-like wands of flowers. And then on the right is that stiff goldenrod, a flat top thing. So easy to grow. You plant one, that's all you'll want because it's going to pop up all over too. And people curse it a little bit. I love it. Loaded with insects in the fall. Combine those goldenrods with asters. Every fall you'll be loaded with insects, and then the birds come and eat those insects, so it's all a good thing. We don't have a lot of time for it tonight, but here we're on the edge of the woodland. Eastern Nebraska is kind of oak hickory woodland. There are all kinds of ephemeral flowers we can put in our landscapes under our trees. Boneset or white snakeroot, common bellflower, both of these are super easy to grow. They'll come to your yard even if you don't plant them. They're kind of probably uninvited. Just let them be. What about non-natives? We love our native plants, but Omaha, Lincoln is not a native biome. It's all contrived. We've dug up all the native soils. So non-native plants also sometimes are important, especially in tough, hard-to-grow soils. Salvia species, moonshine yarrow. Who doesn't like a sedum? They're loaded with butterflies in the fall. Catmint. This is a long way around to say that well-behaved non-natives have their place in our landscapes. If you want to be a purist, go for it. If you don't want to be a purist, don't. But just be aware that some plants we use in our landscapes become invasive plants. So we did that with honeysuckle shrubs. We should have never planted them. Nebraska has an invasive species watch list. If your plant is not on that, don't worry about it. But if you see plants on that list, don't put them in your landscape. Don't forget about trees and shrubs. This is really where we might want to start emphasizing native plants more. Have any of you read Doug Tallamy or listened to any of his recordings? He wrote the book, Bringing Nature Home, The Nature of Oaks, Nature's Best Hope. Fantastic researcher, entomologist in the eastern U.S. who's done all this research about how our native plants sustain the most native insects and then the birds, and especially oaks. So here's some of his research. Oak sustains 517 species of Lepidoptera. Willows, cherries, cottonwood, maples, elm, all of them do really well. And then here's a tree that we plant all over. It's an invasive, horrible plant. We got to quit planting this thing, and that's the Callery pear. Beautiful, white-flowered, fantastically beautiful tree. Spring flower, fall color, easy to grow, tolerates heat and drought. And yet it's an invasive plant. When my wife and I traveled to Tennessee, did I tell you we got a cabin there? The Sweet Seclusion cabin. Look it up on Airbnb or your favorite. No, I got to shut up. Anyhow, when we travel there, we take interstates and we will literally see millions and millions of ornamental pears that have popped up all over our travel corridors in this continent. We got to quit planting it, okay? And there's better things to plant. All these oaks, bur oak, red oak, black oak, chinkapin oak, they're fantastic. Swamp white oak, so easy to grow. They're going to laugh at these droughts and the heat that we have. And you're going to be feeding the birds all year long with an oak tree. Getting past oaks, here's one I would really encourage you to plant. A pecan, a northern pecan. You say you don't want the mess? Don't worry about it. The jays and the squirrels are going to clean up those nuts because they love them. It's not a messy thing like a black walnut. There's a cousin of these. This is the shagbark hickory and the bitternut hickory, native in our woods, just out here along the Missouri River. Put them in our landscapes. There is the black walnut. Don't plant it above your driveway maybe, but put it in your backyard or in the back of a park. A walnut is a fantastically beautiful tree and does so much good for sustaining our squirrels. So maybe we shouldn't talk about it. The catalpa, not technically native to Nebraska, but it's here now and naturalized, easy to grow. This is the catalpa hornworm caterpillar that people like to use for fishing. Maybe you'll get the hornworm on your catalpa and you can have fun fishing with it. Linden trees. Here's a bee on a linden flower. In mid-May or so when the lindens are blooming, you can smell them a block away. They're sweet. Crab apples, not technically native to Nebraska, but there are native crab apples to the Midwest, and they're really great bird plants because a lot of them have persistent fruit. And right now, the cedar waxwings are heading our way, and they're going to be on our crab apples to finish up those fruits. I mentioned that ornamental pear tree that we don't want to plant anymore. Here's a nice native alternative, the black cherry. It's a fantastic tree that doesn't get planted enough. It's not super long-lived. It's a cousin of chokecherry, but it's a tall forest tree right out here, native in the woods around Omaha, and we don't ever put it in our landscapes. The tiger swallowtail butterfly is a big fan of that. Got fruits up high in the canopy. The birds love it. It's fall color, got good fall color and good spring flower. What more do we want from a tree? Have any of you messed with the pawpaw? Pawpaw is native. It just peters out natively just south of Omaha, north of Nebraska City, and across the river into Iowa. There's a lot of it down there in southeast Nebraska. If you want an edible fruit that you can eat in the fall, the Indiana banana or the Michigan banana or the Nebraska banana, we call it sometimes, try a pawpaw, a forest understory tree. And just maybe you'll see that zebra swallowtail butterfly, one of the rarest butterflies we see in Nebraska. The zebra swallowtail loves pawpaw. What about evergreens? It's hard to grow some evergreens here. It's getting harder. But evergreens are the things we want in a landscape in the backdrop from time to time because they provide cover for so many birds in the winter. Concolor fir. This is one that was growing up just north here in the Ponca Hills. The state champion, and it died because it got hit by lightning a few years ago. This is the sad thing about Nebraska's champion trees. They get tall enough to be a champion, but they're way up there. So here comes the lightning and everything else, and then they're usually not long-lived. And then Douglas fir, a tree we don't plant enough of. Take you out west to western Nebraska. How about the Pine Ridge? What's the dominant tree out there? That's the ponderosa pine, a fantastic tree that's great for wildlife. A few shrubs. Shadblow serviceberry. Serviceberry, the birds will eat those the second they're ripe. So you really got to be watching. When the birds start eating them and you want to eat some of them, you get out there with your net and knock the birds away because you won't get any if you're not quick to get to them. The dwarf chinkapin oak, a native Nebraska oak that would be the size of a redbud, produces a prolific acorn crop. If you're into attracting turkeys or deer to your yard, you might try the dwarf chinkapin oak. But it's a fantastic understory tree that loves heat, loves drought, loves sun, and it'll get a nice fall color on it. So it's a multi-stem thing like a redbud, and it's native here. The gray dogwood gets no love in the landscape circles, but it has actually white fruits that come out in midsummer. The birds love it. Easy to grow. American hazelnut, nice fall color. Usually a shrub 4 to 5 feet tall can create kind of a thicket of a plant. And then if you beat these squirrels to it and the jays, you might get some edible hazelnuts in the fall. These are all things that are native right around here. Have you ever messed with a button bush? If you've got a wet spot, plant a button bush. It gets these Sputnik-like little flowers, late spring, early summer on them, white balls, and they will be loaded loaded with bees and other insects, late spring, early summer. And they really love it wet. So if you have a wet spot, standing water, a soupy spot that doesn't drain well, plant a button bush. The wild plum gets no love. You got to be careful with it because it's going to create a thicket of a place for you. You maybe don't want something that's as big as a wild plum, but if you've got an acreage you live on or a backyard that's pretty big, plant a plum thicket. Do you ever run across our eastern wahoo? You've heard of burning bush, the European burning bush, which is also an invasive plant. I would recommend we quit planting burning bush. It's not too bad in Nebraska, but it's real bad in the eastern U.S. We have a native burning bush, a cousin to it, which is what we call wahoo, Euonymus atropurpurea, and it'll get to be 8 to 10 feet tall. They sometimes call it popcorn shrub because the fruit bracts look a little bit like popcorn. They open up and they reveal this bright red seed inside, and the birds love it. Great fall color. Not as brilliant as the other burning bushes, but a nice native plant. Another plant for those wet spots, elderberry. Plant elderberry and those button bush together. Man, are the insects and the birds and yourself, if you can get out there and gather that. The fruits of the elderberry, they're great for jams and wines and other things. Black chokeberry gets a lot of press now because it's a health food kind of a trend for chokeberry, aronia berry. Easy to grow in the landscape. The birds don't pick it clean like they do the service berry, but it will be a late fall winter food if you leave it on your shrubs for the birds. Sumacs. Does sumac sound like anything you want? Most people go, I don't want any sumac. Well, these grow-low sumacs and the fragrant sumacs, they're not a thicket-forming, suckering plant. They're going to stay nice and refined. You can cut them back to the ground, and they almost always have great fall color. And they get a seed head on them most years that's bright red little berry that are attractive to the birds. Currants. We don't do enough with currants. This is clove currant. It's called clove currant because it has a nice spicy fragrance to the bloom. Snowberries and coral berries. And then there's all kinds of viburnums. This is a viburnum called black haw viburnum, native down into Missouri. Good spring flower, fall color, lots of purple fruits for the birds to eat. Our cranberry bush viburnums are easy to grow. Great fruiting plants for birds, and they're attractive in the landscape. Good fall color. Arrowwood viburnum, I have a lot of these in my yard. The birds really love the fruit on the arrowwood viburnum. There's one called blue muffin because it's loaded with these blue-like berries on them. All season long, great attractive plant. And then I'll just throw at you a few landscape examples where we try to tie this all together a little bit to see some of the things I've been involved with. I'll start with my yard, my little yard in Waverly. You can't see this today. I took these pictures today, but I take my front yard and I don't have a whole lot of lawn here, and I wrap around these native plants. I mentioned to you echinacea earlier, purple coneflower. This is my native purple coneflower. I've got goldenrods and asters and grasses and sedges in there. Great, great bird habitat. In the backyard, I've got things like serviceberry at the corner of the house. This is that black haw viburnum, a hybrid black haw viburnum. I got an oak tree I grew from an acorn, which is now 40 feet tall. In the back here is a coffee tree and a chinkapin oak, also both grown from seedlings or seeds. They're now 35 to 40 feet tall. And I'm young, so you can get these trees, right? Who laughed about that? I used to think I was young. So this is my backyard. Here's my feeder. I put up the edge. This time of year it doesn't show much, but the edges is to all perennial plants. Prairie plants where there's a little bit of sun, and then woodland plants under the shade of that burrow. That's how I do it in my yard, and I get a lot of good birds in my yard. I do landscape work in Wayne Park in Waverly. So if you come to Waverly, take a tour through Wayne Park. A lot of the trees are labeled, and you'll see what we're trying to do. We're planting the trees and the shrubs tight, and then we're going in underneath them, and we're planting understory things to tie it all together. And it's season-long habitat for birds, insects, and all kinds of things. The mayor will tell you it looks a little weedy. Justin, the dandelions in the park are bad this year. Yep, too bad, man. Those dandelions are feeding a lot of bees. So don't spray out the dandelions. Now, some years we do have to get after dandelions because they get so thick and bad, but we try to accommodate it all. These are just a few scenes from that, what we're trying to do in Wayne Park and Waverly. Come to Lawson Park, the north side of the town, and we did a little vignette of prairie plantings where we mixed prairie plants of all different types together and just let them be a little wild. This was a Boy Scout project. They helped us do that. We tried a prairie habitat garden right in front of the Waverly High School. This has been a challenge because a certain superintendent doesn't like the look anymore. So you got to keep fighting for these things or they'll go away. They got 40 acres of lawn, but they don't want to have this little bit of wildness right in front of their front door. So if you see me up cursing at the school board meeting, it's because I had to try to save our little patch again. Come to Beatty Elementary in Lincoln if you're ever out to look at something really cool. The elementary school at Beatty, we've had a neighborhood volunteer there, just fantastic she's getting ready to step down. But she has poured her soul into this for over 20 years, Karen Cresswell. Look at the landscape she created for these kids. Beatty Elementary School, the kids are allowed to come in there, they help plant it, they help eat, there's vegetables, they eat the vegetables. The vegetables go to the neighborhood groups, they're used in the school classroom for learning and art, all kinds of things happening in a place like this. I would have said come to Lincoln, to the state capitol. Look how bad they do the landscape there because it's all lawn infatuation. Don't tell the governor I said that, but we got to get working on the Capitol grounds because they pour the water and the chemicals on. But across the street is the Ferguson house. It was the home of the Nebraska Environmental Trust. They moved out of there a year or two ago, and we helped them with a landscape there that was just this interpretation of prairie plants in an urban setting. I thought it was fantastic. A dotted gay feather, penstemons, look at the goldenrods here. But once the environmental trust left, the state didn't want to keep up with it. It's all gone. So, darn it, if you see me cursing at the state capitol, we're going to be talking about that landscape. So in summary, the more biodiverse, the better. Shelter, food, and water. Wildness, stems, logs, snags. Emphasize native plants. Plant in groups with tight spacing, improve and sustain soil health, practice smart lawn care, no pesticides except in extreme measures where maybe you're fighting like emerald ash borer, be water wise, and enjoy, engage, and appreciate wildlife. So I threw a lot at you there. What time is it? Hey, we got it done under an hour. So we've got 5 or 10 minutes for, Q&A. Thank you for letting me come here tonight and advertise my cabin to you. Sweet seclusion cabin. Yes.
So I get a lot of grackles, and to me they're just kind of bully birds. And I know last year I tried to bring in more, but I like about the grackle because I think that they're bully birds, and I like a lot of other birds more than the grackle. And so what I've tried to keep them down is bringing the peanuts, which then bring in the blue jays. But is there anything else you can suggest for keeping the grackles a little bit at bay?
I apologize. I told you I love birds, but I'm not a bird expert. And I don't have to deal with grackles in my yard. Very rarely do we have them in my yard. So I don't have the same problem you do. Are they a common occurrence season long?
Oh, we get a ton of them all year.
Yeah. What are the hundreds at a time?
And they're really around.
Yeah.
They cheat.
Yeah.
They're
I do get a few, and we get the brewer's blackbirds, which can be kind of pesty too. What do you guys think?
Whenever you put your seal of the cap on, and that will deter them, and other birds like them.
Yeah. Yeah, in my feeders, I use safflower a lot, especially when I want to keep the cardinals happy, and then just the black oil sunflower. Now, I've heard that can be attractive to the squirrels and everything else, but those are the two things I use. And then I showed a picture of my suet feeder. That suet feeder, I just love. I got it tied to the side of my tree, and I can watch all the birds coming up and down.
Out less than a day.
Are the grackles that bad? Here's what I figured out on my suet feeder, though. Leave the suet in the plastic cover and just cut the top off and leave that plastic around the base of that. And then at least the squirrels and some of the other birds can't get into it quite as quickly. I'm not a bird expert. I apologize. So you please let us know how you find out. Maybe start eating grackles. They taste like chicken, I heard.
So a source for seeds that I've been using for about 10 years is a place called Stock Seed Farm in Murdoch, Nebraska.
Yep.
All kinds of seeds for native grasses, prairie flowers, perfect sorts. They mail order. So, I mean, that's an opportunity.
Yes, if you're after native grass seed, stock seed farm, right outside of Murdoch on Church Road. I drive by it a lot when I'm heading to Omaha and places. Yep. You'll get to see their native grass fields waving in the wind, and they're beautiful. Late fall, the stock seed farm has tall Indian grass blooming yellow, blue stems and little blue stems, reds and blues. It's fantastic to go see. Yep.
I would like to go back. So the safflower is straightly, I can just speak up. And I can be very active. So the problem with the grackles again, if you say do the safflower, which I do, but I usually mix. So you're saying do straight safflower.
Yeah, because otherwise they'll pick it out and throw the safflower on the ground. Because and the grackles have this memory too. When they remember something's good in there, they're going to go back, keep at it, and your yard will be covered with safflower because they're looking for what you had in there.
Oh, well, the safflowers, I mean, my dogs eat for that. So.
Yeah. Do you guys have to deal with the starlings real bad here too? Yeah. That's my big problem in my feeders. Yeah. I've gone to trapping starlings and getting rid of them. So but they're so beautiful. Yeah, aren't they just beautiful?
And they are beautiful.
All right. See, there's beauty in everything in nature's wondrous pageantry. Yep. A question.
The statewide arboretum.
Thank you for asking that. Yes. So I'm going to have to pay her finder's fee, speaker's fee here. Yeah, so the statewide arboretum has a big plant sale called Spring Affair the last Friday in April. But we have plant sales on campus of the university, starts right around Spring Affair, and then through May and June. You can come buy almost everything I talked about here. We grow a lot of these trees and shrubs from seed or get them in from good suppliers. And then there are other nurseries. I know Mulhall's is a good one here in Omaha that's been a partner here. There's Great Plains Nursery near Valparaiso. They are the leading Nebraska nursery on collecting and growing Nebraska seeds from Nebraska trees and shrubs. They're the leader in that. Hardly anybody else just goes out and collects our native stuff. So it's called Great Plains Nursery up near north of Valparaiso. And they're healthy discount. Healthy discount, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just wondered what you know about, I thought it grew well here, Turkish filbert.
Yes.
And does it get nuts all over the yard?
Another great question. Turkish filbert. I mentioned to you the American hazelnut shrub. There's a filbert or a hazelnut, more or less the same genus of plants. The Turkish filbert gets tall like an American linden. It's a fantastic tree. I've got them in our Waverly Park Arboretum. If you want them for nuts, though, you won't get them. It's a lot like the black cherry because they're up high in the tree. And when they're ripe, the birds are going to get them before you do, unless you knew right when they were ripe and had some way to pick them out. Oh, good. Yes, right. They won't be a mess at all. Not a mess at all. That's a frustration of mine because I keep hoping to find some viable seeds, but the birds eat them up. Great fall color tree, pretty drought tolerant. The Turkish filbert is a fantastic tree. Not native to North America, but it's one of those, it's not going to be like that runaway Callery pear that we're talking about as an invader. And then there are other filberts. I should have mentioned this to you. The Nebraska Forest Service, where I work, has done research in cooperation with the University or Oregon State University, Rutgers, and the National Arbor Day Foundation. And there's been several really good edible hazelnuts that have come out of those trials. You'll see them at the Nebraska City Arbor Lodge complex there where they've trialed them, Arbor Day Farm. And then we have trials at Horning Farm south of Plattsmouth and near Lincoln. And there's two that are really good for the landscape if you're after edible hazelnuts, the Beast and Grand Traverse. And you might want to have one of both so that they cross-pollinate and give you good fruit if you're after edible plants for yourself. Any other questions? Thank you so much for letting me come talk about plants.
Thank you so much, Jeff. With Dennis and great information. All those handouts are up there. I'm gonna let the girls handle the raffles. Just a couple of announcements. First of all, starting from where you drove in, all the way around our building, we planted, me and a colleague, our team here planted over 115 native plants, grasses and stuff for you to enjoy throughout the season. I think 84th Street needed a facelift, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, come enjoy that all season. We're going to have a lot of stuff scheduled around that too. And we have a sale after this. What do we need for our trees? We need bird houses and bird feeders. So 20% off all bird houses and bird feeders tonight. If you don't want to shop tonight, we have a card at the cash register. This is good for a week, one per household. You can pick those up too. And like I said, I'm going to turn it over to the girls for the raffle. And I think that's pretty much. Thank you so much. Thank you. You'll get to like this out too.
All right. Now I'm glad I came. I'm just
Get
teasing.
yourself a bird feeder for Tennessee.
That's right. If we were there more often, I've tried to put out a hummingbird feeder, but every time we go back, somebody had messed with it.
Yeah, yeah.
There was conversation about the ground. One of the other options
Yeah.
that you have is if you get one of these, you put your bird feed in here, the grapple cannot be into the feeder. So that's another option. We've got a couple of these, but that's just one more way to keep a little grass out. Well, I have one and I have it in here. Well, I have, but my cardinals always go to the other feed that doesn't, but will the cardinals be able to get in there? They should be able to, correct or not? I'm not sure about the colors.
They really like flat surfaces, the
Yeah.
Cardinals, so they're probably not going to want that.
Well, my eat off of.
Do they?
I
Okay.
have a one without the well, not without the cage. Yeah. It has a ring around the bottom so they can sit on it.
Yeah.
I was just worried about they didn't like these stuff. But all the other birds are going to be able to enjoy this. Right, they all, and that's what I did with my suet feeders too, because. Yeah, so we have a suet feeder that's inside of the cage. Oh, I was going to say this. There you go. I have raffle tickets. We have 4 t-shirts to raffle off. First ticket is 583076. There you have it. You have it? Okay.
We brought 4 T-shirts, the Nebraska Forest Service T-shirts, and there's a small, 2 mediums, and a large.
Okay, second ticket is 503. I planned to roll 3 of the grasses that you mentioned.
All right. Nice. It'll be fun to watch it grow this spring.
We put some kind of ornamental ones out too, like I call it Blonde Ambition.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic.
I like Morning Light too. That's a real pretty one.
Yeah.
And we got north wind in the back because we get so much wind back there.
Yeah.
Back with the Russian sage patch.
Those switch grasses,
Yep. Yep.
they're so fantastic.
Yep. And we got the blue muffin out there. We got a brandy wine. We got a mohawk.
Man, yeah, you really do have a good mix of stuff.
We just, couldn't go too big out there in front because of traffic and stuff.
Right.
Besides, we got aronia berries and all that. She's
Did
gonna
you-
put like a bird camera up there, take pictures for the store.
Did you have to get approval from the city for what you planted on the strip?
No. We're not in trouble.
Didn't ask.
Trust me, that was nothing but a trouble.
Yes.
and sod strips out there. We're just gonna go with a strip between the sidewalk and the gate or clover. You know. Yeah, we put cat manhole, all that out there. Instead of montrose white, it's supposed to be a little bit more native.
It's gonna be a bird.
It is, a butterfly.
All right, thank you. Everybody enjoy the
Hit by car.
Yeah. Hopefully that speed up there too bad.
Yes, it's very funny.
It just might, some of that's not. So I've